There comes a moment when the invisible stops being just a promise and begins to press against the visible. Not because you prayed harder, not because you tried one more time, but because spiritual timing has been fulfilled. I declare that you did not arrive here by curiosity. You arrived because something within you already sensed that this is a turning point. I affirm that past decisions, which seemed small at the moment you made them, were building a path that is now beginning to reveal itself. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was in vain. I decree that heaven is now aligning circumstances, people, and opportunities in a way you could never have planned on your own. What once felt fragmented begins to make sense. What looked like delay reveals itself as preparation. I declare that your mind exits survival mode and enters governance mode. You no longer react to the environment begins to respond to you. I decree that every unproductive season of waiting ends now. Not the waiting of process, but the waiting that drained your hope. That feeling of so close, I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. I affirm that your spiritual identity is being repositioned. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to reach something and begin to recognize yourself as someone authorized to access. I decree that what was withheld due to misalignment begins to move. What was restrained by fear is released. What was blocked by old patterns loses its power. I declare that your spiritual energy stabilizes. You no longer live in cycles of faith highs followed by emotional crashes. There is consistency. There is clarity. There is firmness. I affirm that your vision expands. You begin to see beyond the immediate problem, beyond apparent limitation, beyond the current situation. I decree that you are now entering a season of silent realignment, where heaven works while you rest from anxiety. Nothing needs to be announced. Nothing needs to be proven. The adjustment happens within before it ever appears on the outside. I affirm that the right connections begin to draw near without effort. People who speak the same spiritual language. Environments that do not require you to shrink who you are. I decree that all mental confusion loses its grip. Decisions that once felt heavy become clear. Choices that once stirred fear now bring peace. I declare that you stop chasing what already belongs to you. What carries your name begins to locate you. What belongs to your purpose begins to respond. I affirm that scarcity loses its argument within you. You no longer think like someone afraid of lack. You think like someone entrusted with inheritance. I decree that old emotional patterns are broken. The need for approval, the fear of getting it wrong, the guilt for wanting more. None of these can sustain the new level that is opening. I declare that your spiritual territory expands. You carry more. You discern more. You sustain more. And because you carry more, you access more. I affirm that your presence begins to shift environments. Where you once adapted, you now influence. Where you once stayed silent, your voice now carries weight. I decree that doors begin to open naturally, without exhaustion, without humiliation, without negotiating your essence. I declare that this is a season of practical answers. Ideas that work, movements that prosper, steps that bear fruit. And if you sense that this message is quietly aligning something within you, without pressure, without persuasion, subscribe to the channel. This isn't about numbers. It's about walking within the same atmosphere. I decree that you are entering a season where heaven removes the noise. Emotional noise. Mental noise. Spiritual noise. What once confused you loses its volume. What competed for your attention loses its importance. And what truly matters begins to stand out with clarity. I affirm that your spiritual sensitivity is being refined. You recognize when something no longer carries purpose. You sense when a path has already fulfilled its assignment. And you no longer insist where heaven has already concluded. I declare that you no longer delay yourself through attachment. You do not extend cycles out of fear. You do not sustain structures that have already lost life. I decree that your courage grows in silence, not impulsive, not emotional, steady, mature, intentional. I affirm that you begin to act with precision. Fewer random attempts, less unnecessary wear, more strategy, more discernment, more results. I declare that your spiritual life enters deep stability. You no longer live from peaks. You no longer depend on external stimulation. A solid foundation is being built within you. I decree that heaven entrusts you with new responsibilities, not because you asked, but because now you can sustain them. You sustain vision, you sustain processes, you sustain decisions. I affirm that your name begins to circulate in strategic environments, even when you are not present, even when you are not promoting yourself. What you carry speaks on your behalf. I declare that the season of being underestimated comes to an end. Not because you defend yourself, but because results begin to appear. I decree that you are entering a cycle of progressive answers. Nothing happens in confusion anymore. Nothing moves without direction. Small signs begin to confirm great decisions. Small advances begin to sustain great changes. I affirm that your confidence is no longer emotional. It becomes structural. You no longer need to convince yourself every day. You know where you are standing. You know what you carry. You know where you are going. I declare that heaven begins to adjust the rhythm of your walk, not accelerated by anxiety, not slowed by fear, but precise. I decree that what once felt heavy now begins to flow. Conversations flow, ideas flow, processes flow. I affirm that you do not force doors. You recognize when they open naturally, and you enter with authority, not insecurity. I declare that your spiritual perception matures. You are not excited by everything. You are not shaken by every resistance. You remain steady. I decree that emotional exhaustion decreases dramatically, because you no longer fight what does not belong to you. You no longer carry responsibilities that were never yours. I affirm that your energy is preserved for what truly matters, and because of that, your results become consistent. I declare that this is a season where heaven validates your choices, confirms your steps, closes dangerous shortcuts, and protects you from rushed decisions. I decree that you begin to experience peace even before full manifestation, because certainty has already been established. There is a quiet point where you realize you no longer need to prove anything, not to people, not to environments, not to systems. I decree that you are entering that exact point, an inner place where external validation loses its power and inner conviction takes control. I affirm that you have already crossed the stage of chronic doubt, the season where every decision needed human confirmation, the season where every step came wrapped in insecurity. That is behind you now. I declare that you now walk with a consciousness of authorization, not arrogance, alignment. You do not rush ahead. You do not hide. You occupy. I decree that heaven begins to adjust who walks beside you. Some presences drift away naturally. Others draw near with clear purpose. Nothing forced, nothing dramatic, everything organic. I affirm that you no longer feel guilt for growing. You no longer feel weight for advancing. You understand that expansion is part of your design. I declare that decisions which once felt too large now become obvious, because your vision has expanded. And when vision changes, fear loses ground. I decree that heaven teaches you to recognize the right time to speak and the right time to remain silent. You do not release plans before their time. You do not expose seeds before maturity. I affirm that your life enters a cycle of invisible stability, low exposure, deep foundation, and this sustains everything that is coming. I decree that you begin to perceive changes that are not external, yet, but they are deep. Shifts in posture, shifts in reaction, shifts in choice. What once knocked you off balance no longer reaches you. I affirm that you are becoming emotionally governed. You feel, but you are not controlled by what you feel. You perceive, but you no longer react on impulse. I declare that your spiritual maturity begins to protect you from decisions that would delay your future. Not everything that looks good is aligned, and now you know this. I decree that heaven begins training you for greater environments, not with haste, but with preparation, because what you are about to sustain requires balance. It requires clarity. It requires consistency. I affirm that you no longer compare yourself. Comparison loses meaning when identity is defined. You understand that your pace is strategic, your timing is specific, your path is unique. I declare that anxiety over when dissolves, because you recognize the now, and the now is already shaping you. I decree that what once felt invisible begins to take form, not yet as full manifestation, but as internal confirmation. You feel it. You know it. You remain. And if this is touching exactly what you've been living in silence, write in the comments, I remain aligned. There is a silent transition that almost no one notices. It does not come with external signs. It does not come with applause. It does not come with announcements. It happens within. I decree that you have already entered this transition, It is the moment when you stop reacting to what you lost and begin responding to what is being built. I affirm that you no longer live trying to recover old versions of yourself. You honor the past, but you do not negotiate the future for nostalgia. I declare that your energy begins to be conserved. You no longer exhaust yourself explaining. You no longer justify yourself to those who do not understand. You no longer bend just to preserve connections that have lost their purpose. This is not coldness, it is discernment. I decree that heaven begins to teach you that sometimes not responding is also a response, and that remaining steady is more powerful than arguing. I affirm that you are learning to trust invisible processes. Even when nothing seems to be moving, you know you are being adjusted. And silent adjustments are the most lasting ones. I declare that your faith matures. It stops being spiritual anxiety and becomes inner stability. You no longer chase signs. You align, and the signs find you. I decree that you begin to recognize that not every kind of progress is fast, but every true progress is consistent. You are not late. You are being prepared. I affirm that heaven is giving you structure before exposure, foundation before visibility, roots before fruit, and this is protection. I declare that you begin to feel less urgency and more conviction, less pressure, more direction. I decree that your mind becomes organized. Thoughts align, expectations adjust, desires are refined. You no longer want just anything. You want what makes sense in the long term. I affirm that heaven begins removing subtle distractions, not bad things, but things that would steal focus. I declare that you learn to say no without feeling guilty, because you understand that every conscious no protects a greater yes. I decree that you enter a season of precision. Less effort, more accuracy, less exhaustion, more clarity. And if you sense that this internal adjustment is happening within you, write in the comments, I choose clarity. There are moments when heaven does not accelerate, it deepens. And I decree that you have entered that exact point, where growth is not loud, but it is irreversible. I affirm that you begin to notice something different. What once shook you now simply passes. What once confused you now loses strength quickly. What once made you doubt no longer finds space. This is spiritual maturity in action. I declare that your identity begins to settle without effort. You no longer need to prove who you are. You simply sustain it. I decree that heaven is sealing you internally so that no external instability can govern you. You no longer live in emotional highs and lows. You live in consistency. I affirm that you learn to remain whole even when everything around you is in motion. This is not stagnation. It is inner dominion. I declare that you no longer rush to arrive, because you understand that those who arrive before the time do not remain, and those who are prepared in the right time remain with authority. I decree that you begin to operate at a higher level of consciousness. You recognize patterns, you identify cycles, you discern repetitions before they take root. This is inner governance. I affirm that your life begins to organize itself from the inside out, not through external pressure, but through internal alignment. I declare that you begin to trust what you sense within more than the noise around you, and that changes everything. I decree that heaven begins to teach you how to walk with lightness, even while carrying great responsibility. You do not carry weight, you carry authority. I affirm that the exhaustion once produced by effort now gives way to a new kind of energy, the energy of someone who knows exactly where they are going. I declare that your life enters a more intelligent rhythm, less waste, less emotional drain, fewer unnecessary conflicts, and more focus, more clarity, more intention. There is a point where heaven stops pushing and begins to trust, and I decree that you have entered that point. You no longer need signs all the time. You no longer need constant confirmations. You no longer need external approval to move forward, because something aligned within you. I affirm that you begin to act with quiet conviction, not haste, not anxiety, clarity. I decree that decisions which once drained your energy now resolve themselves with peace. You know when it is time to move forward. You know when it is time to wait. You know when it is time to let go. This is active spiritual maturity. I declare that heaven is training your inner senses. You discern environments before you enter them. You sense when something no longer carries purpose. You recognize when a door is distraction, not direction. I affirm that you begin to choose more wisely where you place your energy, your time, your presence, and this causes your life to flow with less strain and greater results. I decree that you leave survival mode for good. You no longer react to everything. You no longer answer every provocation. You no longer move from emotional urgency. You move by direction. I affirm that heaven is teaching you to protect your peace without guilt and to keep your focus without explanation. You understand that not everything needs your response. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every door deserves your entry. I declare that your life begins to gain precision, less wasted effort, fewer parallel paths, fewer repeated cycles, more alignment, more intention, more real advancement. I affirm that you become more selective, and for that very reason, more fruitful. There comes a moment when heaven does not change the scenario, it changes who you are within it. And I affirm that this is that moment. You begin to notice that the same situations no longer produce the same reactions. What once shook you now simply informs you. What once paralyzed you now only confirms that you are no longer on the same level. I decree that your inner identity is being repositioned. You no longer negotiate principles for access. You no longer lower your voice to fit into small environments. You no longer adapt to structures that cannot sustain who you have become. I affirm that your presence shifts the atmosphere of places. Without speeches, without effort, without performance. You enter and something organizes. You speak and something aligns. You decide and something moves. This does not come from pride. It comes from quiet authority. I decree that heaven strengthens your posture. You do not chase. You do not beg for space. You occupy. And that redefines everything. I affirm that you are being trained to sustain higher levels, because accessing without knowing how to remain is pointless. Arriving without knowing how to govern is useless. And heaven knows exactly what it is doing. I decree that your inner structure is being strengthened now. You can carry the weight of what you asked for. You can sustain the responsibility of what you receive. You honor the territory entrusted to you. I affirm that you are learning how to grow without losing yourself, to expand without disconnecting, to prosper without fragmenting. You do not become a hostage to what you achieve. You govern what you achieve. I decree that your spiritual maturity accelerates. You understand processes without complaining. You move through seasons without giving up. You build without needing to be seen all the time. And this causes heaven to trust you more. If this resonates with what you are living right now, write in the comments. I sustain what I receive. There is a change that does not happen on the outside. It happens at the exact point where you stop asking permission to exist. And I declare that this point has been reached. You no longer need circumstances to validate you. You no longer depend on the approval of the right people at the wrong time. You no longer negotiate who you are to be accepted in environments that do not recognize what you carry. I decree that your spiritual awareness expands now. You understand that you are not trying to arrive anywhere. You are responding to a calling. And that completely changes how you move. I affirm that you begin to discern what no longer deserves your energy. Conversations that drain you. Projects that delay you. Environments that consume more than they build. You no longer enter cycles out of need. You enter by alignment. I decree that your mind is untied from human expectations. You no longer measure your worth by immediate return. You are no longer frustrated when something does not respond quickly, because now you understand rhythm. Heaven does not operate in anxiety. Heaven operates in precision, and you begin to move in that same cadence. I affirm that your peace becomes strategic. It is not the absence of battle. It is clarity of position. You know when to advance. You know when to wait. You know when to leave. And this spiritual discernment places you one step ahead, always. When the inner world comes into order, the outer world begins to obey. And I decree that this order is being established now. You begin to notice small signs, subtle movements, unexpected responses. Doors that once did not react now begin to move. Nothing wide open yet, but clearly different. I affirm that heaven begins to test your faithfulness in the details. How you respond when no one is watching. How you decide when there is no audience. How you sustain silence when you could explain yourself. And every right response activates greater trust from above. I decree that you enter a phase of invisible construction, where much is being aligned without announcement, where structures are being assembled out of sight, where connections are being prepared before the encounter. You are not late. You are being positioned with surgical precision. I affirm that you begin to feel firmness beneath your feet, even without seeing everything, even without understanding everything, even without total control. because now you trust direction more than logic. And that changes everything. There comes a moment when the invisible begins to demand expression. You can no longer remain only understanding things internally when heaven starts pressing for movement on the outside. And I decree that this moment is presenting itself now. You begin to feel a holy discomfort. Nothing is wrong, yet something no longer fits. The space feels too small. The pace feels too slow. The answers feel shallow. This is not ingratitude. It is expansion. I affirm that your vision begins to stretch beyond what you planned. Ideas arise without effort. Thoughts that once felt too big now feel possible. You begin to see solutions where there were once only limits. And this happens because your internal level has changed. I decree that resources begin to move. Perhaps not yet in their final form, but in clear signals, conversations, proposals, invitations, opportunities that did not exist before. Nothing random. Everything connected. You begin to realize that money is not the end. It is the logistical response to purpose. And when that aligns, the flow begins. I affirm that you stop fighting for survival and begin thinking in terms of structure. Sustainability, continuity, expansion. You no longer ask only, how do I pay? But how do I build? And this shift in the question changes the entire atmosphere around you. Now something important happens. The environment begins to respond to your presence. Where you once had to explain yourself, now you are heard. Where you were once ignored, now you are consulted. Where you once seemed small, you are now seen as a reference. I decree that your authority is no longer only internal and begins to manifest externally. You do not force respect. You carry weight. And spiritual weight always produces natural impact. I affirm that you enter rooms that were never in your plans. You speak with people who were not on your radar. You receive questions that reveal that something in you has been recognized. This is not luck, it is matured alignment. I decree that the fear of making mistakes loses its power. You no longer freeze, waiting for perfection. You move with awareness and you learn while moving, because now you trust the process more than the immediate result. And if this moment describes what you are feeling, this quiet transition into something greater, write in the comments. I move in the right time. There is a specific point where heaven does not only release, it removes old permissions. Permissions you didn't even realize were still active. Silent agreements with scarcity. Inherited patterns running on autopilot. Limits that were never questioned because that's how it's always been. And now, without noise, these begin to close. I decree that old authorizations are being canceled. Authorizations that allowed delay. Authorizations that normalized excessive effort. Authorizations that permitted recurring loss. You do not fight this. You simply move out of reach. And when the reach changes, the effect changes. I affirm that your life enters a phase where wear and tear is no longer normal language. You recognize when something drains you, and you don't insist. You discern when something does not cooperate, and you don't force it. You honor signals you once ignored. This is spiritual maturity in practice. I decree that heaven begins to reorganize the flow. Flow of energy, flow of ideas, financial flow, relational flow. Everything starts to move with less friction. And you feel something new. Lightness with responsibility, clarity without anxiety, movement without confusion. This is the sign that your inner environment is ready to receive more when the inner world aligns. Something inevitable happens. The transfer finds a place to land. Nothing arrives before its time. Nothing remains outside its proper place. And now, you no longer just desire progress, you sustain progress. I affirm that you become capable of handling more without losing yourself. More resources without guilt. More visibility without ego. More responsibility without fear. This changes everything. I decree that what was on hold begins to respond. Not with noise, but with precision. The right doors, not many doors. Aligned opportunities, not distractions in disguise. You learn to say no without explanation. You learn to say yes without hesitation. You learn to recognize what carries your spiritual signature. And when this happens, heaven trusts you. If this moment describes exactly where you are, this point between preparation and manifestation, write in the comments. I sustain what I receive. This is a code of stability. Not to convince anyone, but to register in the unseen that you are ready. Now everything converges, not in an explosion. In quiet confirmation. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to chase validation. You no longer need to explain why you changed. The change is already operating. I decree that your presence begins to produce results. Where you enter, something organizes. Where you speak, something becomes clear. Where you decide, something moves forward. You do not force impact. You carry coherence. And spiritual coherence generates natural authority. I affirm that you enter a phase where heaven responds quickly. Not because you ask more, but because you are better aligned. You perceive signs with ease. Connections adjust. Paths open at the exact time. Nothing delayed. Nothing rushed. This is the point where heaven says, now we can seal, now declare with conviction, I assume my position. I declare that I am not guided by what I feel. I am guided by what was written about me in the kingdom. I declare that my identity is not born from my battles. It is born from the purpose that called me before the battles ever began. I affirm over myself, I did not get here by accident. Every stage had a function. Every delay carried instruction. Every breaking produced alignment. I declare that I no longer carry labels that were not placed on me by God. I reject human definitions that tried to limit who I am. I am not the version that survived. I am the version that governs. I prophesy over my life. My steps come into order. My decisions gain clarity. My time begins to respond. I declare that my mind adjusts to the level of my calling. I think with vision. I act with wisdom. I choose with discernment. I affirm that I no longer delay myself trying to please those who do not walk with me. I no longer lower my voice to fit into small environments. I no longer negotiate convictions to maintain comfort. I declare that I become firm. Firm in my choices, firm in my values, firm in my direction. I prophesy that my life enters coherence. What I think, feel, speak, and do begins to point toward the same destination. I declare, I know who I am. I know what I carry. I know where I am going. And nothing that is not aligned with me remains on my path. Now I prophesy advancement. I declare that everything that was held back begins to move in my favor. I do not chase. I am located. I affirm that the right doors begin to recognize me. Environments that once ignored me now adjust to my presence. Aligned opportunities arise without excessive effort. I declare that my path opens as I move forward. I do not need to see everything in order to walk. I walk and vision is revealed. I prophesy that resources begin to respond to my movement. Ideas find form, projects find structure, connections find purpose. I declare that my life enters a cycle of continuous progress. Nothing stalls, nothing turns back, nothing is lost. I affirm that my energy will no longer be drained by distractions. I recognize what is noise, I recognize what is calling, and I choose with precision. I prophesy that the rhythm of my story changes. What was slow accelerates. What was heavy becomes light. What seemed distant draws near. I declare that I receive authority to sustain what arrives. I do not sabotage myself, do not retreat. I do not abandon processes before their time. I affirm that my life becomes a favorable environment for manifestation. I think like one who carries inheritance. I act like one who has been authorized. I decide like one who trusts. I prophesy over myself. I advance at the right time. I receive at the right level. I remain in the right place. And everything that was prepared for me begins to find me starting now. Now it is no longer about words. It is about alignment. Everything that has been declared up to this point has already begun to move in the unseen. You may not feel strong emotion. You may not notice anything physical. But the spiritual realm responds first in silence. So before any distraction, before any thought tries to pull you away, remain here. Not as a spectator, but as someone who is receiving, accessing, and sealing. What comes now is not a common prayer. It is a moment of adjustment, breaking, and release. A moment where what was activated finds legality, where what was declared finds support. Stay present, take a deep breath, and allow what has been released to find its place within you. Now, we seal. Eternal Father, source of all authority. I enter now not as one asking for permission, but as one responding to a spiritual calling that was already active before this moment. Let this prayer pass through layers. Let it not remain on the surface. Let it reach roots, structures, old agreements, invisible decisions, and everything that was sustained in the spiritual realm without authorization from the kingdom. I declare that, in this exact instant, spiritual environments reorganize around this life. That everything blocked by fear is unlocked. That everything held back by spiritual delay is released. That everything restrained by old cycles loses its power now. I pray that invisible chains fall. Emotional chains, mental chains, spiritual chains, inherited chains, learned chains, chains accepted without awareness. Let none of them survive the weight of the revelation being released right now. I activate access. Access to environments that did not recognize this person before. Access to doors that did not respond. Access to resources that were distant. Access to ideas not yet seen. Access to strategies that were hidden. Access to aligned connections. Access to alternative paths prepared by heaven. Let every spiritual resistance against the advancement of this life be dissolved. Let every opposing force lose legality. Let every invisible opposition be disauthorized. I declare that what was locked in the unseen begins to move in the visible. That what was suspended enters flow. That what was on hold receives acceleration. I prophesy alignment of root. That confused decisions become clear. That heavy choices become light. That closed paths are replaced with new routes. That detours are corrected without loss. That nothing essential is wasted in this realignment. I pray that this life is repositioned without excessive human effort. Repositioned by favor. Repositioned by divine strategy. Repositioned by accurate spiritual discernment of time. Let environments change before this person even arrives. Let doors open before they are touched. Let the right people feel compelled to draw near. Let aligned opportunities locate this life at the exact moment. I activate now transfer. Transfer of resources. Transfer of wisdom. Transfer of influence. Transfer of authority. Transfer of favor. Transfer of opportunities. Transfer of spiritual keys that were stored for this time. Let what was in the wrong hands be displaced. Let what was stagnant be set in motion. Let what was reserved be delivered. I declare that this life no longer operates in survival mode, no longer operates in emotional scarcity, no longer operates under constant pressure, no longer operates in repeated cycles. From now on, it operates in inheritance consciousness, operates in restored identity, operates in spiritual clarity, operates in inner authority, operates in continuous expansion. Let every memory of failure lose its power. Let every limiting internal narrative be silenced. Let all comparison be broken. Let all guilt be dissolved. Let all self-sabotage be deactivated. I declare that the Spirit assumes leadership over the mind, that faith governs decisions, that purpose directs movement, that vision expands, that courage manifests, that advancement becomes constant. Let this life receive emotional stability to sustain growth, spiritual maturity to steward abundance, discernment to choose rightly, sensitivity to perceive the movement of heaven. I prophesy that testimonies will be born from this alignment. Silent testimonies, public testimonies, testimonies that surprise, testimonies that reposition, testimonies that open the way for others. Let nothing interrupt what has begun here. Let nothing reverse what was activated. Let nothing steal what was released. Let this access be sustained. Let this advancement be continuous. Let this new route be protected. I seal this prayer in the unseen. I seal this activation in the spirit. I seal this access in the right time. And I declare, with authority and peace, everything that was aligned remains. Everything that was released flows. Everything that was activated manifests. Thus it is sealed. Thus it is sustained. Thus it is established. Amen, amen, amen. If this word found you, it was not by accident. It arrived because something is already in motion in your life, even if it is not yet visible. May you carry this activation with discernment, courage, and consistency. May your next steps be firm. May the right doors recognize your arrival. May what was released today find room to manifest. If this content strengthened you, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video is an environment, and the right environment sustain the right processes. May your journey continue aligned, protected, and expanding. You are not late, you are positioned. We move forward together.